Hi, it's Jane, and today we're going to learn how to make a simple tote bag. This bag finished measures, I believe it's 15 by about 12 and a half tall this way. It has about not quite a 5-inch, although it does measure a 5-inch depth. Boxed bottom. So we're going to learn how to do that today. The only other thing is you could add cam snaps or metal snaps if you wanted to in this bag, but I'm not going to show you that today. Just know that you could add that later on if you choose to. All right, let's get to it. You're going to need 2 pieces of outer fabric that are 16 by 16 for this tote. And you're going to need 2 pieces of your lining that are 16 by 16. And you're also going to need 2 pieces of some kind of interfacing that are 15 and a half by 15 and a half. You can do 16 by 16. I just choose to do 15 and a half by 15 and a half. And you're actually going to iron this to the back of your front pieces. All right, let's get that done and then we'll move to the sewing table. I am going to start with my lining pieces, and I do take one of those lining pieces. As you can see, I still have the notches cut out, but I am going to take one of those center pieces. I am going to fold it in half and press it down. Since I do sell these in my Etsy shop, I am going to place a label there, and I use that as a guide for where I want the label. And generally it's just a matter of placing the label there and then sewing around the edges. I choose to use sew-in labels. There are a lot of people that will put them in the seam. I just find this just as easy and economical. I do make my own labels. The only reason I make my own labels is because it's a lot more economical right now. And that's just what I choose to do. A lot of people purchase them. There are a lot of good companies out there. A lot of folks on Etsy who will make labels for you. All kinds of things. Sometimes you don't get to choose your artwork for it. Sometimes you do. Just depends on who you contact for that kind of thing. Well, trim the excess strings. Now what I'm going to do is I will place the right sides. I'm not going to do that yet. Basically, I'm going to find my piece here for the outer. I've already pressed my casing. So I'm going to place my casing on the top. I'm going to match up those points. And I am going to take my interfacing with the right side to the right side. My label here. Of course, when I do the other piece, it won't matter. And then I am going to clip it across to hold it. Need to get my clips over here. And I'm just going to make sure that I have that sandwiched in between there. And those edges lined up. all the way across. Now I'm going to take and I am going to sew it across the top here, encasing that. And I'm going to do it to both pieces at the same time. You're going to feel a little bit of a bump when you get to your casing. And here I normally do a couple of back tacks across that. That is a point where you are going to have quite a bit of stress on your machine. So that's what I do on your machine. Stress on your bag with the drawstring being there. So I just generally give it a couple extra swipes. Then I'll move on to the second one and we'll put that in. You'll notice that these are a tad shorter, and than the normal 16-inch long, and that is fine. Simply because you want your bag to be snug in there, your lining. And generally, many times I will make my lining 1/4 of an inch shorter when I sew it or cut it, so that it'll create a much more snug interior. Because sometimes the interior gets kind of baggy and you don't like that. When I have finished sewing those two together, then I double check to make sure that they did enclose completely. And by that I mean I look to make sure there's no holes this way and there's no holes this way. I do finger press this edge down here. Sometimes I'll do it on this side as well. You could take it to the iron if you so choose, but I'm not doing that. Then I'll double check this second one to make sure it meets. Go ahead and finger press, and that's sewn up, no holes. Do my little finger pressing this way. Now, and sometimes you have loose strings, so you might want to cut those off. Now we are going to place these right sides together. So we are going to place them this way, these two together. And generally what I do is I match these seams right here. And I will place a pin to hold them. I go ahead and flip it over and do that on the other side as well. I'm going to match those seams up. And you could press your seam allowances either way that you wanted to on these. And then from there, what I do is I go ahead and line these up on both sides. And I will make sure they meet properly. And I will clip them. Now I do clip farther away from the corners because I am going to box it on both ends. Those don't quite meet up, so I must have had some kind of skewed piece there when I cut. I will do the same down here at this end. And these are shorter than the original piece by about 1/4 of an inch. But here, I will move in and I will place a pin somewhere in here. Match up these two corners. Place another pin up in here. This is the opening that I'm going to leave open when it comes time to sew, and then I will clip the sides. Now I will tell you and I'm going to do this on both pieces, I am going to take my 2.5 inch by 2.5 inch ruler. Now I'm going to place that somewhere in the corner, and I don't know where my pencil went. I normally use a pencil. I think I might have to use a pen today. You could use the erasable markers. You could use pencil. This is going to be cut off, so I don't think it really matters. Do place it in the corner, and I do make them 2.5 inches. I like my bags to be a little deep. And I'll do that on all 4 corners. And I will clip them. So I will finish doing that. Get them all cut. And then we'll get on to the next part where we do the actual sewing of the bag. Now I have my corners cut, and I do keep these pieces because they can be used for 2.5 inch squares to be used in other sewing projects. I do keep these as well, even though they have interfacing on them, because they can be folded in half and used as leaders when you want to start sewing and you want to have something to start sewing on before you start chain piecing. So I will leave those aside, that kind of thing. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start sewing from this edge right in here somewhere. Oh, where'd my pen go? Didn't fill out. Happens. Probably stuck in the other side. But you do want to leave an opening. Generally 5 fingers is enough, so I'll probably start over here. Going to sew from this edge to this edge, from this edge all the way up, all the way around, completely through there, and then through the bottom, across the seam, across the bottom. For newbies, you might want to do a 1/2 inch. I've been doing this so long, I do a 1/4 of an inch. The only other thing is if you have cut your fabric here exactly to 14 by 16 instead of say 14 by 15 3/4, then you might want to use 1/2 inch seam allowance on the bottom so your bag will sit a little more snugly inside into the bottom there. All right, let's get sewing. And when you get to these edges, do sew back across them. You could do that a couple times if you wanted to. It just keeps it from fraying and coming undone, because sometimes you'll see that happen when you start to box your piece. do pull your pins out. Don't sew over your pins. One of the reasons I tell you not to sew over your pins is sometimes if you do, what happens is your needle will hit that needle, break it, and you will have pieces fly up. And if you've ever had a piece of metal stick in your eye, that's no fun. When you are working on your outer pieces, you are going to sew completely across all of those seams. Remember, we're only sewing partially because we want to be able to have an opening for once we get our bag closed. From here, you're going to go ahead and box your corners. One of the easiest ways is just to take it, match your seams together. You can press each seam across, finger press it, and then you're just going to sew across it. I do a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch. Oh boy. If you could hear that, that's my machine that was catching with my thread down in the bobbin area. So I need to check my bobbin thread to make sure it's still in the right position, doesn't have any extra nasties in it. So I will do that, and we'll be back in just a second. All right, cleared the little bit of a rat's nest, and we'll start over again. I do more than 1/4 of an inch seam here. Lots of times, many people will do a scant 1/4 of an inch. I am taking just a smidge more than 1/4 of an inch. And that's so these corners will fit in there nicely. I'll do the lining sides first. And then we will go in and do the actual pieces of the outer bag. And I do back tack. That way I know it's not going to come undone and frazzle off. Won't see a lot of fraying, that kind of thing. Help make the bag a little stronger. Now we're going to come up and we'll box the outer portion of the bag. Meet up those seams. And here, what I do is I sew straight across. I back tack beginning and end. And then I sew a second seam right across the first. I think it just strengthens the bag. So that is the reason I do that. Then we'll box the other side here. Just repeat that. And then I just double check to make sure that all seams are enclosed completely on both sides. Trim up the extra threads. That's not going to work today. Trim all the threads up, regardless of where they're at. These clips are, I think they're called side, and they're meant to get up close to those sides. Double check to make sure there aren't any other strings to be trimmed. If you can see, they've got like a little indentation there. And yes, technically you wouldn't really have to clip these extra threads because it all is going to be encased in between the layers, but I think it's good practice to trim up your extra threads. You can give it a shake. You can pull them off, whatever you choose. Now we reach in where our hole is and just grab the basic. Normally what I do is I'll push in the corners of one side like this. Grab that, and we birth the bag is what it's called. So you're just going to pull your bag through that opening. If your opening is big enough, you'll have no issues. Sometimes you have to fight a little bit, but it's all worth it in the end. You're going to see you made a beautiful bag and it's ready to do some other work. We'll close up that opening in a bit, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stick my hand down in there. I'm going to make sure each corner of those bags are poked out. Don't use your scissors, either use your fingernail or a chopstick. If you use your scissors, sometimes it'll go straight through the seam. And then you'll have to pull this back out and sew through it again. Then you'll come up here and you want to push these corners out as well. You could trim off the corners if you wanted to. I don't find that necessary most of the time with bags like this. Some you do need to. And then we're going to close up the opening. Generally, if you pull it side like that, you can get it pretty close to the edge. Usually it'll fold in on itself. You could finger press it. Sometimes we have problems and need to fight with it a little bit, and that happens. All right, let's sew the opening closed. You can do this by hand if you choose. I generally do it by sewing machine. And 1/8 of an inch is probably a good size to catch the entire seam. Make sure you turn it over to see that you've got the entire seam shut. Clip your threads. Now, the next step is we need to do some top stitching on this. So you want to push down your corners into the other corners of the exterior. You could take it and press it. I don't generally do that because I find this works just as well. Do it this way. I've already done a little bit of finger press there. Now I am going to do some top stitching. And I am going to turn up my stitch length to 3.5 for the top stitching. Now I have a 1/4 inch foot here on this machine.